you're going to contribute to the kids' pencils and paper and stuff like that to help kids at school. School starts here in a couple of weeks. We always gather up anybody. It's all strictly voluntary, but if you're going to put pencils, paper, yes.
One of the teachers told me, one of our teachers here told me that they always can use Kleenex.
Always can use Kleenexes, yeah. Yeah. And wet wax, okay. We are in Genesis chapter 17. That's our starting point for tonight. Of course, we're still on Abraham, and this particular chapter here talks where God changes Abram's name to Abraham, because I've been trying to call him Abraham because that's just as simple for me. And he takes Sarah's name from Sarai to Sarah. Anybody else change their name in the scriptures you think of? Saul to Paul. Peter, he's called the Rock, and he's called several different things, yeah. Any others? What about Jacob? Changes his name to Israel. Any others you might even think of? Was that there are some places that, you know, when people become Christians or whenever they dedicate themselves, this is their terms, dedicate themselves to God, they change their names, but there's no scriptural thing that says anybody's got to change their names from one to another, but this is an example that God actually did this. I guess if God tells you to change your name, then you better change your name. But then there's no scriptural basis to say that we have to change our names once we become Christians, or once we become dedicated to this or dedicated to something else. But here we have God changes Abraham and Sarah to their final names, the names we are more familiar with. And God tells Abraham, he says, going to make a great nation out of you, and through your descendants. And of course, they've already helped God out. They've already got it figured out. It's going to be Ishmael. Ishmael is a young man now, or almost a man. He's 13 years old. And God said, no, that's not who I've got planned. He said, your wife Sarah, she's going to have a child. What does Abraham do? It says he laughed in his heart, it said. Fell down and laughed, yeah. Now, I've got a question for you, Leland. Now, in about the next chapter or two, when they tell Sarah laughs, and they kind of chastise her for laughing. But Abraham, there's no chastising Abraham. What's the difference, Leland? You always ask me a tough question. I'll ask you one.
Well, I thought Sarah handled it better. She laughed to herself.
Okay.
But then she denied it.
Okay. Why did Sarah think it impossible for her to have children? Huh? First thing, she's 90 years old. Right at it.
If she hadn't had a child by now, she was barren.
The old King James says that she no longer, I can tell you how the way it is, no longer to be with her as the way of women. In other words, she had went through menopause. So she figured it was impossible for her to have children. Besides that, she's got an old husband. But both of them laugh. But God accomplishes his purpose. They have Isaac when she's 90 and Abraham is 100 years old. But, yeah, yes, sir.
It's worth noting in verse 14,
Okay?
it says any uncircumcised male would be cut off from his people.
Yes.
And Colossians chapter 2, verses 11 and 12, makes baptism our spiritual circumcision.
Okay, yes.
Essential for us being identified with God.
Okay. Of course, this is a physical law, and when it says cut off, it don't mean they run him out of town. What does cut off mean in the most time in the Old Testament? They killed him. If they refused to be circumcised, they killed him. They didn't just run him out. Didn't run him away from the family. But if God institutes the rite of circumcision to differentiate between them and everybody else. And not only the ones who are born in the house, but if you buy a man, he's got to be circumcised too. If he's going to live in the house, he's got to be circumcised. So Abraham is circumcised around close to the age of 100, and Isaac is around 13 years old. Not Isaac, Ishmael.
Virgil,
Yes, sir.
in John 7:22, Christ arguing with these people, trying to, and it says, they don't think he's really Christ, I
Yeah.
believe, but he said, Moses therefore gives unto you circumcision, not because it is of Moses, but of his fathers, and you on the Sabbath day circumcise a man. They arguing with him what he did.
Yeah.
I don't understand it very
Well, you're healing somebody on the Sabbath day. That means it's work. But they would, if it was the eighth day, they would circumcise a child on the Sabbath day because it was the eighth day. That's what was the commandment, was to circumcise him on the eighth day. But Bob's right. That was their if they refused to be circumcised, they were not allowed in the tribe. They were cut off. They were killed if they didn't leave. And baptism is now our circumcision. It's our covenant with God. This was God's covenant with Abraham and his people, that they were now his people. Baptism is what makes us get into fellowship with God, and we become his people. That's our covenant with God. Is when we enter through baptism, God adds us to his church. We don't add anybody to the church. God adds people to the church. But Abraham, and like Leland pointed out, Abraham laughed out loud. Sarah laughed in her heart, and but then she denied it. I'm just kind of skimming through these chapters because these are, there's so much of it that we've been over and over and over before, and some of it repeats itself for emphasis. If I get my page to turn here. But anyway, in one day, Abraham circumcised himself, circumcised his son, and everybody that was in the household was circumcised. Then in chapter 18, is any questions on chapter 17? 18, we begin to talk about Sodom and Gomorrah. Remember, we've talked about Lot being Abraham's nephew, and how that their herds got so big that the land wasn't sustainable because they're just roaming around looking for grass for the animals to eat. And so Lot pitches his tent towards Sodom, which is where the better land is, and then next thing now we find that Lot is in Sodom. And this particular chapter here God promises Isaac, and like I said, another promise about the son. And then God comes down in the form of a man, to talk to Abraham. And there's two others, there's three men. Abraham sees them coming. They put on a feast, they get everything ready to eat. Abraham evidently realizes that he's not talking to regular guys, he's talking to one of them, he's talking to God. And they get ready to leave. Two of the men go on toward Sodom, and the one who represents God stays. And he says, God says, essentially, Abraham, and I made a covenant with Abraham, so I shouldn't hide from him what I'm about to do. And so he tells him, that there's been a great cry come up to heaven about all the wickedness and evilness in Sodom and Gomorrah. And we're going to go down and check it out. And if it's like it is, like we think it is, of course God knew it was, we're going to destroy this place. And we talked about it before, how that Lot was, Abraham was afraid of Egyptian kings, different kings, when have Sarah tell him he was his sister, which she really was, but she was also his wife. But here Abraham has the nerve to bargain with God.
Before you get to that, Virgil,
Okay.
verse 17.
Okay. Yeah, the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? So God didn't need to explain anything to Abraham, I don't guess, but he decides to do it because he said, Abraham's my main guy. He's the one I want to, through him everybody's going to, Christ is going to come essentially. That's what God's, and so I don't want to hide anything from him. I'm going to tell him what we're fixing to do.
Verse 19 explains why he's not going to hide.
Yeah. He says, I've commanded, he says, so I say, I've chosen him that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness. So it's God, Abraham is a righteous man, and Abraham's going to have a child that's going to be designated to, through his descendants, all the nations of the world will be blessed. So I'm going to be up straightforward with Abraham, because I expect him to be straightforward with his children and tell them just,
And Abraham and his descendants can look back on this account
yeah,
and say, God was justified. God said he was going to.
yeah.
God is merciful
Mm-hmm.
for being willing to spare the city if.
Yeah, I said that they decide they bargain, Abraham bargains with God, that's my words. And he starts out, well, what if there's 50 people? That's good, righteous people. Of course, Abraham knew his nephew Lot and his family lived down there. Well, you going to kill the whole town if there's 50, including 50 righteous people? God's, well, if I find 50, well, that's... Then, well, what about if there's this? Well, they get down to 10. And God said, no, so if I can find 10 righteous people, I won't destroy the city.
But instead of using the phrase bargain, I would say that Abraham pleaded.
Pleaded, okay, you might be a better word.
And that's the way I have always based my prayer.
Okay.
Something that I want, I plead with God.
Okay.
And we have another scripture where it says that the widow kept going back to the judge and kept going back to the judge. And
Yeah.
finally says, I'm going to give her away because she wore me out.
I'm tired of having to from her coming in, she's just here all the time, you know, making a plea, you know.
When I'm sincere about that prayer, I'm gonna do my best to wear God down.
Okay?
He's still gonna do what's in his plan.
Yes. Did he find 10 people?
I'm gonna let him understand my perception.
Yeah, where you're coming from, yes. Yeah. Did he find 10 people? I mean, we have Lot, who evidently is, you know, he's a good fella. You know, he's not, he's, you know, he's been raised right, if you will, and, you know, he knows much of God's plans. And he has literally had no influence on these people.
Did he find any righteous people?
He lets Lot and his family escape.
He saved Lot
Yeah, he said, but then, yeah,
and his daughter.
yeah.
But if Lot was really righteous, would Lot have been in that city?
Well, another place says that the things that went on there vexed his righteous soul. You ever stop and think about that? What vexing your righteous soul would mean? Yeah. Mr. Brown.
I'm trying to find a place, seems like I remember when Lot's wife, or who was, Lot's wife, I think, looked back and
Yeah.
she was turned into salt.
Yeah.
Full of salt. Because when they was ordered not to look back when they left.
Order not to look back. Yeah, that'll be a few chapters ahead of us there. Yeah, she looks back. But you know, when you're talking about vexing his soul, that's what we do sometimes when we go, like, you know, we want to get as close as we can to sin. Even though we know it's wrong, we want to look and see what it looks like, and we're going to look and see what it looks like, and pretty soon we're tied up in it. We're tied up in it. It's got us. But you're right. They don't find 10 righteous people. But God does allow Lot and his family, all he can get to. He can't, we don't know whether he had any sons or not. All we know is he got his wife and 2 daughters to follow him. And they didn't have husbands. And his wife looked back, and she turned into a pillar of salt. I always get the picture of a movie I watched of some kind about it, and it must have been, and it was it looked like a statue, you know. And she turned into a statue of salt. That's the guy that made the movie. That's his idea of what it looked like, you know. But and it could have been that way, and it could have been just been a big old tall block of salt. But whatever it is, God, I mean, Abraham does plead or bargain, whatever you want to say about with God, and yet they don't find 10 righteous people. What cinches it for the angels? The angels went to research it out. They go in, and Lot's sitting at the gate. And he sees them. Hey, come in my house. We're going to stay out here in the street. No, you got to come in my house. Well, here comes all the guys. Let them out here. We want to have our way with them, you know. Lot even offers him his 2 daughters. No, we want the guys.
Didn't think much of his daughters, did he?
No. Well, they was guests in his house, and he was there to protect them. Whether he had an idea that they were something different, they were angels, I don't know. But he did just, you know, you're right, you know. He thought less of his daughters than he did of his guests, put it that way. Yes.
for protection.
Yeah, he said, y'all know, no, you can't sleep out here in the street. You got to come in my house. And Lot goes out there trying to get them away, and well, we'll just take care of you. Well, they pulled him back in, and then they blind the guys where they can't find the door. But that's how evil the place had become.
How many people were blind?
It says young and old. In other words, it made no difference what age they were. I don't think it tells us exactly how many, but it was there, those that were there was trying to break down the door.
I think it was that group that was in the
Yeah, that group that was in the street. Now, how many that was? No, the whole city wasn't blind. It was just that group that was out there.
Because I think he tries to get his daughter's husbands to be,
Husband to be, yes.
so evidently they weren't with that group.
They went with that group, but they wouldn't go.
Right.
And anyway, God utterly destroys this place. Not only Sodom and Gomorrah, but it says the cities of the plains. And it was such a destruction that archaeologists, as far as I know, have never found any trace of it whatsoever. By the description of where it is or was in the Bible, much of it is underneath the Dead Sea. But now the Salt Sea was there already. But it was one deal I read was just a scientist they was trying to prove that something else caused it. But they said it would have been like an atomic bomb. It just utterly wipes out everything. But even with an atomic bomb, except for right there where it's at, out there a little ways further, you would still find foundations in the ground. A tornado could come through and utterly wipe out houses down to the ground, but the stuff that's under the ground most of the time is still, you can find traces of it. They hadn't found trace of anything. Last time I heard anybody even discuss it. Haven't found anything.
Well, is there a reference that sea was a Dead Sea at that time?
One place calls it a Salt Sea, I think. Calls it the Salt Sea, and it's always been too salty. And water comes in, but it can't go out anywhere. You'd think if enough fresh water kept coming in, it would finally freshen up, but it doesn't.
It was on the internet, so I think where there was a video, they was doing archaeology over there or something, but they found a place where you dig down so far, there was little balls what they call brimstone.
Brimstone, okay. He says that he saw it on something that they dug down there so far, and they found what they termed as little balls of brimstone down underneath the ground. But now whether that's what
Pictures of them digging it up,
showed them pictures of digging it up.
like I said, it just little,
But anyway, God didn't mess around. He utterly destroyed it. Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of the plains. So evidently the whole area there was given over to all this immorality. Next week we'll just start there about chapter 19.